So this whole unit is going to be introducing us to the ideas of statistics, which will be a nice break from the math that we've been doing before, and that we're really going to be just looking at conceptual ideas and adding some vocabulary so that we can start talking about statistics. And that'll be pretty much for this whole unit, not just this section that we're working on now. So I need to start off with what really statistics is, right? And so we see these kind of things all the time, right? Average home price is this amount, median household income is this amount, percentage of Wyoming residents that own their home. These are all interesting, right? I suppose, to me at least, but these are not really what statistics is. Statisticians don't go memorize a bunch of this stuff. That's not what we do. What our purpose is to actually figure out how we would get this kind of information, right? So, and what would we want to use as a measure for these things, right? So an average home price is actually what we call a mean, and those are sometimes difficult to actually contextualize. A median is, this point at which half the data is less and half is more. We'll get into all of that later. But those are fundamentally different ways of looking at what, average might mean in everyday, just English conversation, where we usually just mean the typical house, right? As opposed to a specific mathematical measure. And then this other one, this is a percentage, right? So these other two numbers were fundamentally numeric data that we'd be looking at. How much money is brought into a household, how much money is spent on a home. Well, this is a yes or no answer of, do you own your home or not, right? And so then we tend to resort to things like percentages, where I can't really give a median or an average number. So we're not just going through and memorizing this stuff. What statistics really is figuring out how we would actually plan to gather that data, and then we actually go out and figure out how to best get that data. And then after that, we also do the organizing, summarizing. That summarizing is getting good measures like averages or percentages or something like that, analyzing, interpreting, and drawing conclusions. A lot of people kind of assume that statisticians are actually starting at this process of organizing, right? That somebody else actually plans the data collection and gathers the data. And I can tell you right now from doing a ton of consulting work that tends to be what people do. Is they want to go study something and they go gather a bunch of data, and then they ask a statistician to figure out what we can figure out from that data. And 9 times out of 10, they've done something that makes it impossible for me to actually answer their questions because they didn't necessarily gather the data that they wanted, right? If at first, right, they were only interested in what age group people were in, right? Under 21, and 21 to 50, 50 plus, right? Something like that. Well, if you do that and you just get categories for the ages, I'm never going to be able to tell you what the average age is. Right? If they had just started by gathering the ages and then broke it down into categories, we could have worked with it. And so, that's my only, thing about this particular slide here that I'm talking about, is that if it ever becomes a thing where you need to actually do some research, I highly recommend talking to a statistician before you gather your data. We go through a ton of coursework on experimental design and survey design, where we actually make sure the questions aren't leading in surveys, that they haven't introduced some bias or anything like that. And that needs to be done at the beginning, not the end. Otherwise, you've basically spent a bunch of time and money gathering data that won't answer the questions you need to answer. So we're there all the way through the process of designing how you actually get the data, getting that data, and then actually making the best conclusions we can from that. And, right, shouldn't be talking that much about data without defining that. This is just collections of observations. So this needs to be things we actually observed. Otherwise, it's not data, right? Not what we think would happen, or, I suppose they would have said this. No, it needs to be something we actually got, either something like we would measure or count, or, some survey responses, something like that. But it's got to be something we've actually observed. Otherwise, it's not data. All right. So I hear this quote all the time, so I might as well address it, right? There's three kinds of lies, damned lies, and statistics, right? Basically saying that statistics are lies. And I have to, as a professional statistician, I don't know, right? I'm teaching a math class here, but that's actually what I do. I'm a professional statistician. My main degree, I have a master's in statistics, and then I got another graduate degree in math also, so I can teach these kind of courses. But most of my work is statistics. And I can tell you that, especially within the political world, statistics are used to lie. And I agree with that statement. That doesn't mean that, right, these earlier statistics that I gave you about the average home price in Casper, that you should immediately assume that's correct because someone's trying to mislead you. That's completely false, right? That's absolutely not what's going on there. The idea here is that we need to develop some kind of statistical literacy so that we're actually thinking about, where this data came from. Are they trying to convince me of something in particular? Right? When we see, 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Crest or something, like, well, Crest is the one telling me that. I don't know if I should necessarily trust that they gathered their data in a way that gets the best conclusions here. So that's what we're going to be doing through a lot of this unit, is just getting better at recognizing BS statistics when they're given to us, and how to actually look into things and figure out for ourselves whether that's really a trustworthy statistic. Producing statistics is a more difficult thing to do, and that's really for another course. This is mostly just going to be looking at what we call statistical literacy, which is just being able to look at statistics and say, that seems reasonable after seeing what they did and who's giving you that information, versus that seems absolutely incorrect. And so, I want you to understand that I'm not going to try to defend other statisticians all the time and say that everything's perfect and they do everything right. There is just a ton of misinformation out there disguised as relevant statistics. Just because you've calculated some average doesn't mean it's measuring what we want it to measure. So anyway, that's a good intro to what we're going to be talking about. And in the next few videos, I'm going to be talking about this statistical literacy idea, and then how populations and our samples relate to each other.